Our top story, US President Joe Biden's national security advisor is headed to India. Jake Sullivan's visit comes ahead of Prime Minister Narendra Modi's state visit to Washington, D.C. later this month. Amid China's territorial ambitions, Washington is working to deepen ties with the world's largest democracy and sees a deeper military-to-military and technology ties. Sullivan will meet India's NSA Ajit Doval and other officials to discuss deepening collaboration across critical areas of importance between US and India. Last May, Joe Biden and Narendra Modi announced a bilateral initiative on critical and emerging technology dubbed icet. The two leaders directed their governments to work on advanced technology from AI to semiconductor chips and quantum computing, especially in defense. The Biden administration is reportedly preparing to sign a deal that would allow US-based General Electric to produce engines for military aircraft on the Indian soil. India, the world's largest arms importer, depends on Russia for nearly half of its military supplies. Over the decades, India has bought Russian fighter jets, tanks, nuclear submarines, and an aircraft carrier. While New Delhi's security cooperation with Western countries has increased, it continues to rely on Russia for defense and oil exports. India has long-standing security ties with Russia and has refused to condemn the Ukraine invasion over the past year. However, Prime Minister Modi told Vladimir Putin last year this was not a time for war. Washington has been eager to meet more of India's defense needs and to seek the G20 host's support in putting pressure on Russia for the war in Ukraine. And for more on this, we are now being joined by Ambassador Arun Singh, who has served as India's ambassador to the United States. He is joining us from New Delhi. Welcome to the broadcast, sir.
Thank you. Happy to join you.
Ambassador Singh, Jake Sullivan will be meeting Ajit Doval in a short while from now. This is coming ahead of Prime Minister's visit to the United States. There's a lot in the pipeline as far as bilateral deals are concerned, especially in defense and technology sectors, including allowing GE to produce military aircraft engines in India. How significant is this meeting between the two NSAs? What goes on behind the scenes here?
This is certainly a significant meeting. As you noted, it is happening just 1 week before the Indian Prime Minister's visit to the US. And India's Prime Minister's visit to the US is also not a routine visit. He is going for a state visit. Now, in the entire 2.5 years of the Biden administration, the Indian Prime Minister would only be the third visitor at that level of protocol, following the French president in December last year and the South Korean president in April this year. So it's a very important visit. So he's come here partly to prepare and see what else in terms of outcomes can be generated for that visit. But also very important, he's following up on the meeting that he had with the Indian National Security Advisor in January this year, when they launched an initiative on a partnership on critical and emerging technologies. Now, everybody acknowledges that these technologies, and some of them you mentioned, artificial intelligence, quantum, 5G, 6G, cyber, biotech, commercialization of space, semiconductors, defense, are going to completely transform the way we live, the way we work. And in many of these areas, work everywhere is at a very initial stage. And therefore, to kickstart some of the work, to catalyze, to look for partnership, is a very important dimension. So in fact, it was after their meeting in January that in the statement that was put out, there was a specific reference to US trying to expedite the processing of GE being allowed to transfer technology and doing production in India in partnership for jet engine technologies, something that the US has not done so far. So given all that, I think this will be a significant visit. They will address the progress that has been made in these areas of technologies since their last meeting and how they can advance it further, including in preparation for the Prime Minister's visit.
Ambassador Singh, United States and the West have been trying to wean India away from Russia, especially when it comes to oil and defense purchases. But where do India's interests lie? You know, it's a diplomatic tightrope to balance these ties between US and Russia for India, isn't it?
No, I think the US now recognizes that India will be taking its decisions based on its own interests. And India will sustain the Russia relationship if it believes that that is in its own interest. And Russia has been an important partner for India. As you mentioned, more than 50% of our defense inventory is of Russian origin. And we've had political support in the past from Soviet Union and then from Russia when it was not available from the West, or we were under pressure from the West. So those are important factors. Also on India-China issues, we would not like Russia to go over to China. And I think the US acknowledges that. And if you see some of the statements that have come out from US leaders, the Secretary of State now has said on a number of occasions that they understand that India's relationship with Russia developed at a time when the US was not willing to be that kind of partner. And of course, they've added that now we are willing to be that kind of partner. Or Jake Sullivan, who's coming here today, he has said that with India, we are playing the long game. So I think there is a recognition that there is growing convergence in the interests of India and the United States, including in the Indo-Pacific, in terms of technology partnership. You're looking at the size of the Indian origin diaspora in the US, more than 4 million strong, the largest single country presence of Indian origin diaspora. And you have 200,000 Indian students in the United States building networks for the future. So given all that, there is certainly a growing convergence of interest between India and the US. But India also has interest with Russia. And I think they understand that India will take decisions based on its own interests.
Sir, let's talk a little bit more about this growing convergence that you're speaking about, and let's get the Saudi-China axis into the picture. We've seen Saudi Arabia of late gravitating more towards China, when earlier it was firmly aligned with the United States. Given that realignment in West Asia, how crucial do you think it is for the United States to keep India by its side?
So I wouldn't call it a realignment, although some adjustments are certainly happening. And I think you've seen statements from Saudi leaders that China is a very important partner for them, that China has emerged as a very important market for them for energy. And this has evolved also because the United States has become self-sufficient for energy and is less dependent on West Asia or the Gulf countries for energy. So that change is certainly happening. But still, the US remains an important partner for countries in the region in terms of their security needs. Sometimes there is not full convergence. US did not support entirely Saudi Arabia's efforts in Yemen. I think there was disappointment in Saudi Arabia when some of their oil pipelines came under attack, and they believed from Iran or supported by Iran, and they felt that the US did not respond adequately for that. So there has certainly been disappointment related to that. So they are all widening their options. But given that, again, you'd have noticed that one major new grouping has emerged in the context of West Asia, which the US has supported, which is the I2U2. India, Israel, US, and UAE. And I think that is a recognition by all the other three countries that India has legitimate and very important interests in West Asia. And you may recall that towards the end of first week of May, there was a meeting in Saudi Arabia of the national security advisors of US, India, Saudi Arabia, and UAE.
Yes.
So I think various countries, each one of them, are looking at different relationships, different options, so that they can maximize their interests.
All right, Ambassador Arun Singh, we leave it there. Thanks very much for joining us with your perspective.
Thank you.